Welcome to our debate on the 7Ds for sustainability: digital, debt, democracy, demography, defense, decarbonization, and de-risking globalization. And today we will be dealing with the issue of debt. And we have a very knowledgeable expert with us, Marco Buti, former Director General in the European Commission, responsible for finance. So maybe my first question to you. Debt is a serious problem. We are having currently a debate in France where the new government is trying to limit debt very much. But we also know that debt is very much dependent on growth. If there's growth, then there's debt sustainability. If there's no growth, like it is the situation now in a couple of countries, including Germany, then debt is becoming a major problem.
Absolutely. I mean, the 7D publication is very right. Too little debt is a problem. Too much debt is also a problem. We have debt that is now very high. I mean, the forecast of the Commission, the autumn forecast, point to debt over 80%. It has come down after the surge during the pandemic. I think it was the right moment at that time to increase issuance of debt because we had to respond to an unprecedented shock. It has come down, helped also by the outburst of inflation. Now I think it has to be put on a gradual declining path. Certain countries have more problems than others, clearly. I mean, you may reference to France, Italy. I mean, France in particular, I think is new kid on the block on this. All of a sudden, I think the country, and I hope also the public opinion, has realized that there is an issue. In a sense, it is more of a problem with France than with other countries because the bond vigilantes, the markets, they have never put pressures on France. So even during the global financial crisis, other countries, take Italy, Greece, Portugal, Spain, got under pressure from the markets. France didn't. It was, as they say, scotché to Germany. Now I think the markets are seeing that there is an issue. Spreads have gone up. I think France has the main issue in France is the level of public spending. It is 8 points higher than the European average. So 50 for the euro area, 58 for France. It has grown actually over the past years. And that is it's an issue also in relation to growth because excessive spending is a problem for growth. So control of spending is key for to put the French public finances on a sustainable trajectory. Italy, I think, if I want to summarize it, is an issue of productivity. I think very high debt, but very, very low growth. So the reforms, investment, which is the landmark of the new fiscal rules, so allowing a trade-off between the gradual reduction of deficits in order to incentivize reforms, it has to be taken very seriously. If Italy doesn't make courageous reforms and shift resources to investment, very, very difficult to keep debt on a sustainable trajectory. Okay, Germany is a case of very low debt, around 60%. I think if we want to summarize the German problem, it's more of an issue of the production model that is excessively outward-looking, and in a world of weaponization of trade and currency, depending too much from external demand is a question of vulnerability. So each countries have their own problems, and overall we have to have a coordinated strategy at the European level to make sure that we step up, growth in a sustainable manner.
I agree very much with your description. I mean, Italy and Belgium have historically very high debt levels, but they've also shown historically that they're able to manage it and that they do it in a very responsible way. Germany is in a special situation after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and also with the new question marks in our relationship to China. So we are going to have a new government as of the 23rd of February, very likely, and then that new government will have to address that issue and develop a new growth model and economic success story for Germany. France, again, is a different story because Michel Barnier, the new prime minister, who was a member of my academic council until his election as French prime minister, he in fact had to confront the country with reality. You had the impression that the political elite behaved as if deficits don't exist. 6% deficit was extremely high, and as you have said, to spend as the state 58% is not sustainable.
No, I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, France historically, go back to the historical time series of primary balance, so the budget balance net of the interest burden. France has never had a primary surplus. So, I mean, you go back, I think it's probably 50 years, never had a primary surplus. So in order to repay debt, in a sense, putting debt to GDP ratio on a downward trajectory, clearly you need to have a relatively manageable interest burden and sustained growth. But you need to have also a primary surplus, so the numerator and not only the denominator. So it's a new reality for France. They have to adjust, and they have to adjust clearly on the spending side. On Germany, I hope you are right that on the 23rd of February we are going to have a new government, because traditionally it takes quite a long time to negotiate a coalition contract in Germany. So it is of the essence, also from the point of view of the European response, that Germany has a stable, forward-looking government quickly after the elections. I don't think Europe can really afford, in a situation in which you can see, from the first appointments in the new US administration, Trump has to be taken not only seriously, but also literally. And we know what is going to come on the trade side. We need to be ready, and we cannot do without Germany in Europe.
Yeah, I think the formation of the German government after the 23rd of February might need a couple of weeks, but the advantage could be that it could be again two-party government. Three-party government now has been proven to be very, very difficult. If the current opinion polls would materialize as electoral result, it's very likely that the CDU might have the chancellor, but with either the Social Democrats or the Greens, it would be two-party government, and that in the management should be a bit easier. I think the problem now was that the governing parties had a joint vision on culture, but not a joint vision on the economy. So the Social Democrats wanted to have some additional social spending, the Greens wanted to have some additional spending on the ecological transition, and the Liberals wanted to lower taxation, and that didn't really go together, especially after the ruling of the Constitutional Court. So there's always, of course, also the question of debt on the European level. We had a big experiment, we are still having, with Next Generation EU. There's a discussion that maybe we need something else. Again, mentioning especially defense to catch up with the enormous efforts that are done by Russia and Vladimir Putin. But from my point of view, the Next Generation EU, even though it was necessary in that situation, had a couple of shortcomings. On the one hand, there was a very precise agreement between the European Parliament and the Council for the introduction of new own resources, even with precise dates and what should happen and when should the Commission make which proposal. But no new own resources were introduced, which is now raising the problem. How are we going to pay back? And is this detrimental to the normal annual budget of the European Union? Secondly, there was no parliamentary oversight on the European level by the European Parliament. And recently I was in a discussion with a high-level representative of the European Court of Auditors who said, this was all about aims, but whether aims have been materialized is very difficult to say. So probably in the future we would need to have not aims but outcomes if we were ever to engage into such a process again.
No, I agree on the assessment. I mean, the lack of parliamentary oversight is due to the legal base. Article 122, which allows the Union to intervene in exceptional circumstances where there is no direct competence. Actually, the Ursula von der Leyen Commission 1.0 would probably be remembered as the Article 122 Commission, because not only Next Generation EU, but many other decisions were made on the basis of this rather obscure and not very well known article, almost never used in the past, if not for responding to emergencies like climate disasters and things. Now it has become it has been institutionalized, but it is clear that if you want to have a structured response, you cannot rely on something that is for emergencies only. So this is one, it's an important issue. We will need to, I think the Union find, I think if we want to have a more permanent response, clearly a different also legal base. I fully agree that Next Generation EU was a major breakthrough. It shifted from an input approach, which is essentially that of, let's say, traditional cohesion policy, to an output approach, but not yet to an outcome approach. So I think we have to make the extra step in terms of making a difference on the ground and not only respecting what is important, intermediate targets, so milestones and quantitative targets, but less concerned about a change on the ground. I have to say also that the Next Generation EU has another element that is, it was probably inevitable politically, but is a shortcoming. I was at the European Commission. Actually, it was my last months when we put forward the Next Generation EU proposal. In the proposal of the Commission, it was 750 billion at the time. Then, with inflation, they have become more than 800 in nominal terms. But what happened then? The Commission had proposed the RRF, and then a number of other programs at the European level to be implemented at the European level. When the proposal of the Commission entered the machinery of the Council and the European Council, what happened was that the 750 billion was kept, so that came out as it went in, but the internal composition changed, and there was about 80 plus billion which shifted from common interventions to transfer to member states. So why so? Because everybody, in a sense, politically was happy. The more frugal countries could go back to the public opinion and say, we resisted no more than 750 billion, and then the main beneficiaries, take Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc., they could go back to their public opinion and say, we fought hard, and we increased the share that comes to us. So if we think about a Next Generation EU 2.0, I think the issue of the balance between what is done at the national level and what is done at the European level has to be reviewed. And I think the name of the game for something that is a successor on Next Generation EU, I think would be to supply of European public goods. And I think you mentioned defense. This, in a sense, if one is looking for a trigger now to unlock also the political resistance, clearly defense is the name of the game. I think thinking about proper response, I think European defense policy will have to be declined in terms of, I think, a European budgetary system. So what can be done and should be done at the national level, what should be done at the European level, and the combination of delivery and financing, which is the optimal one. I mean, the challenge of defense and security is such an, let's say, a systemic one that one has to ensure a proper vertical coordination between what is done at the national level and what is done at the European level.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. And I also agree with the argument that European public goods should be financed on the European level, in fact. And there's an additional argument. For the moment, the burden of the additional defense effort is very much on Central and Eastern European countries. If we were to finance it together, it would assure that everybody contributes equally, dependent on his or her, the country's capacity to do so. And I think that would be a major advantage. We just did today in the Academic Council of the Martens Centre a debate on the Draghi report and potential consequences, alternatives. And we had a very interesting report from Daniel Gross, who's the director at CEPS. And he was saying that the whole armament budget in the European Union is just, in brackets, 50 billion, because we just invest 20% of the defense on armament. But what we need now is additional armament. So it's a relatively limited scope. It could be assigned also for specific projects, like, for example, the rocket defense shield for the European Union. And it's clear that the frugal countries, especially Finland, Sweden, Denmark, they have a strong interest that there is additional investment in defense. So I agree with you that if it ever were to happen, from my point of view, the preconditions are that the failings of Next Generation EU, which we have described, are properly being addressed. I would also agree that probably it's in the area of defense.
Yes, I think, look, when I talk about a European budgetary system, this implies, let's say, a coordination at the national level, horizontal, and a coordination between EU and the national level, which is the vertical one. Take the issue of defense as an example. Then it can be applied to other European public goods in the green and digital transition, competitiveness, etc. So you have the combination of what is delivered at the national level and financed at the national level. There, I think the important thing would be to have a coordinated approach. For instance, now that we are starting to apply the new European fiscal rules, so after the reform adopted the last spring, and defense is one of the European priorities explicitly cited in the regulation. So we would have to foster the incentives for countries to get to the 2%, to the famous 2%, and to do more on that front. And I think the new European fiscal rules are designed in a way to provide the right incentives. Then what you have is the other combination, which is financing at the national level, but carried out delivery at the European level. This is the case of what Draghi calls the aggregation of demand. So instead of each one of the member states going individually with purchases, we do it at the European level. We do it in a coordinated way. I recognize it is more difficult for defense equipment than with vaccines. Well, that's what we did during the pandemic. But I think it's an important element there. So it has a double advantage. I think we demand aggregation and joint procurement, you save. And second, you have a more coordinated approach on this, so that you have less disparities. Good, this is one of the big problems that we have. Then you have the combination, which is delivery and financing at the European level. So nuclear shield, nuclear deterrence, and air defense. These are typical European public goods, let's say, of the pure type. So I think here delivery and financing should be done at the European level. And there you have the issue of how you finance this. So new resources on the one hand, key, and one can consider also a European public debt if needed on that front. So the coordinates of a European budgetary system has to be applied, I think, in the case of defense. Mm-hmm. It is such an existential threat that we have to really approach it in a systemic manner.
Yes, and also, I mean, there are estimates, among others, from the European Parliamentary Research Service that the way we currently organize defense markets leads to a waste of 30% of taxpayers' money. That's not really acceptable. And one of the reasons is that defense companies never know when are they going to ask again to produce something. So therefore, they have to ask amounts for their products which are exaggerated. So if we could stabilize demand, we would also stabilize production, and therefore would have the possibility for the relatively quick build-up of production capacity, because the companies would know that in fact they have somebody who is buying, because their problem is they normally have only one who can buy, which is the state. So I believe that would be a much more efficient organization of the market.
I mean, speed is of the essence here. Yeah. I mean, there has been armament being bought for supply to Ukraine from other parts of the world, US, but also some East Asia. Yeah. Simply because the capabilities was here in Europe available, but the speed was not there. So one had to wait for 6 months when the need was the next day. Yeah. So I think here it's supply and demand have to be aligned in a more effective manner.
Yes, and the mandate that the new Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius has received from the Commission President is saying very clearly that at the end of his term, after 5 years, the European Union has to be ready for whatever security challenge there might be. So we cannot postpone this very much further. We have to start to act and be efficient in this mandate very quickly. May I ask maybe a last question, Marco Buti? Yes, European debt is high, but if we look at the development, then the increase in debt is much, much quicker in the United States and in China. I mean, China has very serious debt, given that it's still a mid-income country, and in the United States is now clearly above 100%, with a current deficit of 7%. Lots of spending during Biden, lots of spending during Trump, because he lowered taxation but didn't lower spending. And it seems that the new Trump administration will also not be very fiscally responsive.
That's an euphemism.
Yeah, exactly. I try to be a diplomat, even though that's not my education. So we will be acting in a very difficult environment for maybe also financial stability.
Yes. Look, how many times we have said in the past that if one looks at taking the EU or the euro area, as countries having the 20 countries with the euro, if you compare to the US, we are in a sounder position overall. We are just above 80% of GDP. US, it depends how you measure it. Federal is about 100%. Overall debt about 120%. I mean, there have been estimates of the impact of the application of the Trump program. If he does what he has announced, I mean, we are going to have toward 2050 200% of GDP debt in the US. Okay, we have to be very careful here, because I remember, I mean, I lived and I was Director General of the Commission during the global financial crisis, and I remember in 2011, for the first time, it was Standard & Poor cut the ratings for the US Treasury from AAA to a notch lower. What happened then at the time was that this created uncertainty at the global level, called financial unrest, and the first victims of what happened in the US was actually the euro area, because the increase in uncertainty actually create market instability, and we were not ready at the time with the instruments that now I think we have, like the ESM. So immediately the instability crossed the Atlantic, even though it was generated by an event in the US. So that's why it is of utmost importance that what we do on next MFF, on the next generation EU, on defense, etc., this goes hand in hand also with the completion of economic and monetary union, capital market union, banking union. I know it is difficult and extremely sensitive in a number of countries, but we have to make progress on that front also. Otherwise, we remain vulnerable, and in a world of increased instability, the ball ends where the more vulnerable situation is. And if we remain fragile, I think we risk on that front there. I think it's absolutely essential for us to, first of all, be ready to respond to what Trump is going to do. I think so. I think there is work being done. The Commission, I'm sure, is going to be ready with the retaliatory measures in case we have tariffs applied from the US. But at the same time, I think we will need to strive for keeping markets open. And it is in the EU DNA, the multilateral system to which we contribute. So I think it will be very important to reassess what strategic autonomy and open strategic autonomy really means. We cannot rely any longer unconditionally on US defense and security. So that is going to be one element. But we are going to we need to also to, at the global level, strive for reform of the economic governance, global governance, also in relation to other countries, Africa, Asia, critical raw materials, etc. So the Trump shock is again a very substantial one, and we are not yet ready. I think we would be a big mistake if now national leaders one by one go to kiss the ring of the new boss at Mar-a-Lago. I think we have to reassess and show unity. I think we have a model that eventually is going to be on the right side of history, but it has to be, let's say, strengthened to make sure that it is more resilient to the shocks that we know are going to come.
Yes, thank you very much, Marco Buti. In effect, strategic autonomy for me is the capacity to deal with external shocks. It's something very pragmatic, and we had many of those over the last 15 years, including, of course, Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And I think our best situation is when we are strong, when we bring our own house in order, when we address the weaknesses which we are having. We cannot be permanently dependent on the goodwill of outside forces, and I think the next 5 years have to be about this. So I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you
for your contribution. I'm sure that also our viewers have very much enjoyed it. This time our emission on debt. Please distribute it also to your friends and anybody else who might be interested, and see you back next time. Thank you.